Dude, never did it.
All right, welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon, and I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. Today, we're covering the year 1962, and we're joined by Riley Trahan of the Nerded Here, etc., etc.
How you guys doing? Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. And what an appropriate, I don't know what you guys are usually, I think I got a little peek behind the scenes. You guys are pretty up to date. What a good time for us to be discussing these two movies about deserts and like blind political ambition and how we should grapple with those things.
Totally. I have to ask right off the bat, please, we haven't seen Dune 2 yet.
Oh, no, zip.
So
I'm going today. I'll be seeing it later today.
And there's political ambition. I will say those two things.
Yeah,
but other than that, yeah, no.
Wait, Jake, you're seeing part 2 today?
No, I'm going later today. Yep.
Okay. I'm not seeing it until next Saturday. So everyone, please be quiet. I wanted to go. There's only one real 70 millimeter IMAX theater in New York City, and it's booked out. So going next Saturday. A real quick introduction to Riley. He's the host of the Nerded Here Empire. We got to know him on the Flooping the Pig podcast that Kevin Ford and Justin Houston and I all host because he was writing about Adventure Time for Entertainment Weekly's website.
That's right. Yeah. A million
years ago. It was a long
ago.
time ago.
Yep. I am the entertainment editor at NAHF.com. We have a bunch of different shows we do over there, but we've been out of the movie review saga for a little while. So I'm happy to be back in it with you guys.
Well, I did notice that you at least touched on Dune 2. So I'm glad I was able to get that warning out of the way.
Yeah, for sure.
We are talking about some Dune 2 adjacent things. The first being the movie that Jake recommended for me, which is a little less adjacent, but we can stretch our imaginations. It was the Manchurian Candidate, the original Manchurian Candidate. Jake, why did you recommend this movie?
I recommended it because, first and foremost, I love it. I just think it's really great. I think it also is really interesting to see how well it would hold up today. It was remade, in 2004, so I thought it would be interesting, of course, to kind of compare it to that. Also, I really love that it has a very villainous Angela Lansbury, who, for people who grew up in our age bracket, she was Mrs. Potts in Murder, She Wrote, and so I thought it would be interesting to for you to see her in a role that is very much not those things. And it also got Frank Sinatra as an actor, which I didn't know how many Frank Sinatra movies you'd seen. And like I said, first and foremost, I think it's really great, even though it's super bleak. I just think it's a really well done movie and certainly an interesting kind of a time capsule for when it came out.
What's it about?
Frank Sinatra plays a former sergeant in the military, and he was in the war with a guy named Sergeant Raymond Shaw. Raymond Shaw was a war hero, and he supposedly saved their entire platoon. He comes back. Raymond Shaw is given this Congressional Medal of Honor, but his sergeant, the Frank Sinatra character, is keeps having these very strange dreams about what happened when they were over there in the war. And the dreams are feeling a little bit more like reality than maybe just dreams. And then he finds out that okay, well, other people are having these exact same dreams. So he tries to basically try to solve kind of what's going on. Meanwhile, there's also political machinations going on. The Raymond Shaw character, his mother, is trying to angle his stepfather into be for a vice presidential spot.
Riley, what do you think of the movie?
It's great, right? It is. I have a difficult time with movies like this, sort of these totemic works, right? Because it's difficult to sometimes put your head in the 1962 space. Like one of the difficulties, not difficulties, but like the movie is playing to its audience. And one of the things it knows it has to do is explain brainwashing. So it keeps like saying brainwashing and then like telling you what brainwashing means. And so as a modern audience, you're tempted to check out a little bit there, right? And you can treat it just like an extended Twilight Zone episode if you want to, but I really don't think you're getting what this movie has to offer if that's the lens you put on it, right? If you sort of mentally check out at that point. It is so cool and deep. Like you say, the Sinatra performance is wild, and like he's in a lane, Jake, where we don't see him often, right? Like you're used to like kind of slushed Frank Sinatra on stage, sort of making fun of Dean Martin or whoever. It is very cool, and it's interesting how much of a passion project it was for him, right? And I think that really comes out on screen. The dream, again, this is one of those things where like it's an eras thing, right? The dream framework doesn't always work for me. It's sort of because I know the story and I'm a little bit like, hey, let's get to the part where he turns into a brain-controlled sleeper agent. But it's cool. It's a fun story. I like this version more. Nothing against the Denzel version, but I would take this version, I think, every time, just because I like the cool Cold War paranoia. It plays very authentically, a cool relic of its time in that way of like, oh man, the commies are coming for us.
There's a few interesting things that you brought up there. One, the brainwashing bit. So I recently watched this movie called Voice in the Mirror. It's a Harry Keller film. It stars Richard Egan, who's the most boring man in the history of Hollywood. And I only watched it because Walter Matthau was in it, and I'm watching all of Walter Matthau's movies. But this is a movie that has to explain what alcoholism is to a broad audience. It's essentially a movie about the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. Without ever naming it. It's preachy, it's annoying, and over again, it's doing what I'll give it credit for is it is doing the legwork of letting people know that alcoholism is a disease, and that for most people, you can't conquer it yourself. You're going to need help. But holy crap, does it hammer that into you? It's like watching a Christian movie now about
right. Yeah.
And there is some spirituality involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, so not surprising. I didn't really get that so much from The Manchurian Candidate, and I loved the brainwashing scenes, the dream scenes. In fact, I was kind of not feeling it during the initial. Where are they in Vietnam when the movie starts? No, Korea. Yeah. Wasn't really feeling that part. I wasn't really understanding Raymond Shaw's relationship to his unit. And then I loved how stylized and just weird those scenes were. And what really brought me into the movie was when the African-American soldier had his dreams, it completely changed who he was seeing in the scene. There's a bunch of little church ladies. I thought that was great. And then from there, just a lot of really cool looking shots leading up to it. And especially the spoiler alert for a 60-year-old movie, the sleeper agent is awakened scene where he's about to snipe. They never say the political party in either version, right? Yeah, I don't think so. But the Republicans.
Yeah.
He's about to shoot the Republican candidate for president. The way that that's shot with the extreme close-ups to the face centered in the screen, which I thought Demme did really well. It was one of the things I did like in the remake, where Demme was very frequently doing these centered close-up shots. I don't know what emotion he was trying to evoke, but in me it was, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like looking people in the eye this much.
Yeah.
It's one of his moves, right? He pulls that in, I think, all his movies, but Silence of the Lambs is the one that I always think of, where he squares up on everybody, and especially Hopkins just lets him like barrel the camera. I think it just sort of draws you into like feeling connected to that character and whatever it is that they're going through in that moment. I love the Talking Heads concert film that Demme did, and just got to see it in Stop Making Sense. And I just got to see it in theaters when it came out. And it's another one where he tries to, like, as best he can, really square up on Burns while he's performing. I think it just, like, seeing him like that really, really gets to you as the audience. And yeah, like you say, in this particular story, it's very affecting.
We got to cover Stop Making Sense on this podcast because I had never seen it, and it was coming out in the theater, so I went and saw it in IMAX, which was maybe a mistake, maybe a little bit of a waste of money. It's old,
but it's louder.
It was loud. There were times when I was upset I didn't get napkins with my popcorn to shove in. While I love that album, but it was loud.
It took my wife to see that with me, and I don't know if she really had any idea of what to expect. And a couple of months later, she was reflecting on it. She was like, that was weird, but we had a good time. I was like, that's totally fair. That's a good way to assess it.
I asked both my wife, and we used to go to trivia every week at a bar nearby, and I asked the host of trivia to come with me too. And both of them were like, I don't think this is going to be for me.
I don't know what they're missing.
Yeah, it was great. There were a few funny little quirks of the original that I have to touch on. Near the end, again, actually, all of these things are in the finale. Sinatra is sure that he has to stop Shaw from doing something. He doesn't know what. In fact, he thinks there's a bomb. And he tells his commanding officer, there's a bomb. I have to stop it from going off. Wait, the national anthem's playing. Let's stop and be respectful of the national anthem. But that sets up something very, very funny. Frank Sinatra running, which is the greatest thing in movie history. I can't believe anyone wanted to sleep with Sinatra after seeing this, because he runs like Phoebe running in Friends. It's like the exact same thing. It's wild. This is the coolest guy on the planet.
So his job involved a lot of standing still.
Very clearly.
Yeah.
But what I found so interesting. So we had a party here around Christmas time. There were some kids, and we don't have like a lot of DVDs or stuff for kids in the house, but we have That's Entertainment, which are these retrospectives of studio musicals. So we put it on, and Sinatra can dance, obviously, right? And he's in all these movies with like Gene Kelly, and he's dancing around. I cannot believe he doesn't know how to run. Sorry, I'm like harping on this.
Yeah.
I cannot get over it. And then the other piece was, and I'm curious what you both think. One thing that the remake I think did a lot better than the original, maybe the only thing, the character of Eugenie,
Usually.
Sinatra's girl.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand. She meets him on a train, and at first I thought, oh, it's a red herring. They want us to think maybe she's a spy too, and then she ends up just being a woman who will ditch her fiance for a dude she meets on a train. What was that?
I felt that about the first one too. I was like, why is she just? She gives him her address like within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. Like, is that something women just did in the 60s? I thought that was that's one aspect of the 62 version. Yeah, that doesn't quite work because she almost has she doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose.
She's just there, I think, so that he can talk to some.
Yeah, so for exposition and because she's Janet Leigh, she was a couple years right after Psycho. I mean, yeah, you throw another big name in there, then they just,
Yeah, she's kind of getting slotted into this role of like the Bond girl, right?
Yeah.
Where she very quickly becomes romantically entangled with our hero, and then maybe we're sort of supposed to be suspicious of her for a period of time, only to then learn that there's nothing to maybe not be as worried as we thought. I don't know how. I really like Lansbury in the picture. I don't know how effective just the like again, maybe it's just because it's totemic and I know the story, right? But like, I don't know how much I'm sold on I shouldn't be worrying about the mom. I might just want to bring that up because I want to shout out I like to sneak Lucille Ball into any podcast I can. And she was apparently Sinatra really wanted her for that role. So I just love that. Mostly for me to be able to say. But yeah, I don't know if I think Lansbury's great in the movie, so I don't think it's an acting problem. I just think I'm always like squared up on her from the go.
Well, I'll throw you a Lucille Ball bone. I've only ever seen her in one movie, and it just happened. It's in this movie called Guide for the Married Man.
Okay.
And she's in it for about 10 seconds. It's kind of an anthology film. It's another Mathau. That's why I watched it. But it's directed by Gene Kelly in one of the most bizarre pairings of a topic and a director ever. There's no singing or dancing in the movie. It's just about whether or not Walter Matthau can learn how to cheat on his wife. And Lucille Ball plays the wife of a woman who's cheated on in a story that he's told about by Art Carney, who is a kind of a mascot for this podcast.
She just pops up for like 3. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. And she has no jokes. She's not funny. I think it's just like a friend situation there. It was interesting to see Lansbury in this role. If you want to be really shocked by an Angela Lansbury scene, not so much because of what she's doing, but because of what happens to her in a movie, check out the original production of Death on the Nile. She gets done dirty in that movie. It's very violent. Probably my favorite of the Hercule Poirot movies, period. I like the stuff with her. I thought it was interesting that this was essentially, depending on how much you think Trump is indebted to Putin, this predicted a lot.
Yeah.
The stepfather's a real dope.
Yep.
And she's fully bought into this Manchurian coalition of communists.
Oh, I love the scenes where he's like, there are a guaranteed 174, and then the next scene, like, he can't keep the number straight, and he's like, just give me one number I can remember. Come on, please. That's all I'm asking for.
But it's brilliant. It actually makes a lot of sense. It's just seeding misinformation so that she explains it, so that people are asking not how many there are, but that there definitely are communists.
Yep.
In what is it, the Defense Committee or something like that?
Right. And wanting to just start with, we're going to keep it as vague as possible. And then people start pushing him for more specifics. Yeah, I think that there is a lot of this movie and Network are very similar in my mind in like when they were made. I think they were probably very salacious and like hot topic-y for people. But now they feel sort of like blasé for me. I'm like, yeah, no, for sure. This is what happens all the time. Definitely.
This is just everyday
100%.
stuff for us now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that brings up that like some of the stuff in the remake is sort of, I would even say like watered down from stuff in the original. So there's no, who's the enemy? Corporations.
Right.
I got to be honest, I'm not that afraid of corporations. I mean, like, I get where the anxiety comes from, like BlackRock, and that was what we were dealing with at the time with, Afghanistan and Iraq. But it doesn't feel as insidious in the culture as the Red Scare did,
right? Or even just like I'm perhaps nervous about the political power that
sure.
a corporation can wield in modern day America, but not in like I'm a guy on the street and they might blow me up way. Right. Which is like sort of what Denzel is dealing with.
Right. And also like maybe it seems less scary because that ship has sailed. Like that's already what's happening. But there were a few other things. Like I didn't think the brainwashing stuff was as compelling maybe they were just in what is it, the late aughts. They're like, we're not going to go as weird with it. We're going to show you exactly, like, it's going to look like Abu Ghraib more than it's going to look like David Lynch. But that's not why I watch movies so much. Was this movie, the 56 version, did it get any Oscar love?
You say 56?
You tell me.
62.
62.
62. It did. It had. It did get 2 nominations. It was nominated for film editing. And it did not win. And it was also up for best supporting actress, Angela Lansbury. Yeah, but she did not win either. 0 for 2.
That's too bad.
I just wanted to call out 62 is the year that Patty Duke wins the supporting actress Oscar for playing Helen Keller, which is of course a big performance. If she's not slotted in that year, I think Lansbury wins. I just wanted to throw that out there. There's also a lot of kids that year, which is because it's also the young woman from Kill a Mockingbird.
In supporting.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. One last thing, sorry, we mentioned it, but the Eugenie character in the remake, they did figure out what to do with her and made her a sleeper agent of her own for the FBI.
Yeah, that worked a lot better. I liked the 04 version. I don't like it as much. Obviously, like we've all said, it's not as good as the 62 version, but I like that they made it, different enough and, more timely to like the time it came out, made changes to it to make it their own and make it different. And not just, we talked about Psycho and like the Gus Van Sant remakes, like why?
Right.
So, so I appreciated the none of the differences and like, Denzel's doing his Denzel thing in it and Meryl Streep's doing her Meryl Streep thing in it. And I like Liev Schreiber. So I think it's a good remake. It's not a classic or anything, but I think it's good.
I have to do my Jewish guy thing because I just think this is a cool parallel where Lawrence Harvey and Liev Schreiber are both just really tall, good-looking Jewish dudes who played the same role, and that never happens in a movie in its remake. That is pretty neat. Also, Liev Schreiber needs to just be in more stuff that's actually in theaters.
I hope he's going to be in Deadpool. Not a movie I'm necessarily planning to see, but if he is, it'll up my percentage chance of seeing it. There's all this talk about all these Fox Marvel characters showing up in Deadpool, and his Saber is that who he is? Whoever he is. Yeah, it's an under-remembered performance. But I went to go see that movie after my senior prom. They had booked out the theater for us to watch Wolverine Origins, and I expect to see Liev Schreiber.
It'd be cool if they somehow got him and Tyler Mane in the same.
Let's do it.
Sabretooth. Yeah, I mean, why not, right?
Bet you guys didn't think we'd talk about Deadpool on this podcast.
I mean, I'm so burned out on the MCU. I gotta tell you. I think
I always find a way.
Echo really did a number.
I didn't manage to get to that one. Unfortunately, I'm sure I will. It's on the old list.
We're very split on this podcast. Jake liked it. I
like Echo.
Yeah,
I'll see it there are more movies that you guys want to talk about that I would love to talk about. I'll watch it eventually, Jake. I'm not avoiding it. With Marvel, it's like I have deadlines, right? So like when Daredevil comes out, I will have to have seen Echo by then, right? But until then, it's just out there. I can do it whenever.
I had that in my mind, and I was like, I don't know. Sterling Harjo stuff is really good. How bad could Echo be? Sorry, Jake, I know you like it. I was just like, this is the most boring use of these great actors I've ever seen.
I didn't make it. You're not insulting me.
I'm insulting you and your taste.
You personally. My wife and I went up to Manhattan for a show and hung out for a bit early last year, and we saw them filming Daredevil. And then I thought that was so cool. And then they got that new talent and scrapped everything. So
yeah, they film a lot of this stuff. And I live in Jersey City now, and they film a lot of this stuff here. And it's gotten to the point where I'm not excited to see them because all it really means is like there's going to be more helicopters in the air and it's loud.
You've become a New Yorker in the Marvel Comics universe, just like rolling your eyes. The superheroes are everywhere all the time. I love that.
Right. I actually do feel that way about most of the things that happen here. All right, let's do a hard pivot to a big movie that I recommended for y'all. It was Lawrence of Arabia. I can't believe Jake hadn't seen it. It won every Oscar. It's huge. David Lean is like one of the top 5 most copied directors of all time. And you've never seen Lawrence of Arabia. So this is a movie about T.E. Lawrence as he helps the Arabs in the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire during World War I. And it's all about, well, I can't say it's all about him because they had to make a sequel called Dangerous Man, starring Ray Fiennes in 1990, which I'm sure Jake will touch on because he watched this for some reason.
We'll touch on it briefly.
But we have a lot to cover in this 4-hour epic. Jake, what did you think of Lawrence of Arabia?
Obviously, the whole reason this podcast exists is because it's movies that we've never seen. But I mean, of all the movies that I had never seen, this was the one that was like, I mean, really at the top of the list. Like, gosh, how have I never seen Lawrence of Arabia? I mean, it's the movie. It gave us Steven Spielberg as a director. I mean, he's literally credited as the reason he makes makes movies, and that was, you know, such a big influence on him. So I don't know why I had never seen it. It really makes no sense. And I'm also obsessed with the Oscars. I've tried to see all the Best Picture winners. So yeah, I don't really have a good reason for that. But of course, now that I've finally sat down and watched it, I mean, this movie's awesome. It looks amazing still. I mean, just the cinematography in it is great. Peter O'Toole is phenomenal in this. He's in almost every shot of the movie. I mean, he carries the entire thing. It's of course a very white savior story, of course, but I mean, I'm not going to cancel a 1962 movie over it. We're just going to acknowledge it, and you know, we don't need to spend a whole lot of time on that. It is what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting story. I mean, the battle sequences are good. I mean, there's behind the scenes, you know, the warplane stuff is really interesting. There's for a nearly 4-hour movie, it goes by fairly quickly, and even for the pace it sometimes has, it's not always the most quickly paced movie, but it doesn't really feel slow, or it doesn't really feel like it drags. Yeah, I really liked it a lot.
I was gonna say, Jake, you shouldn't feel too bad because I only watched this movie the first time a couple years ago. So, you know, you get to it. The runtime is intimidating, right? The runtime is startling. And I've always been somebody who has advocated for powering through the intermission. Like, if you need to get a bathroom break, get a bathroom break. But I got the 4K Steelbook that came out last year. I managed to snatch that up before it was sold out almost instantly because I have my buddy who hosts the news show with me over on NIHF.com, Deepak Chitnis. He texts me anytime a deal like that is going on, and I managed to get my hands on it. So that's a 2-discer because it's too big, too long, and too good looking for one disc alone. So I put the first disc in, and it ends at the intermission. And I went, I think I'm gonna shower. I think I'm gonna do some groceries. I think I'm gonna, you know, work it out for a little bit. And then a couple hours later, I came back in and threw in the second disc, and I found it to be very digestible in that fashion. So I don't know if that's necessarily the way I'd recommend taking it on for everybody, but I did it this time and it worked for me. So if the runtime's an issue for folks, I'd say that's a good way to work around it. But I really like the movie. I do think it's beautiful. I was happy to get that 4K disc just because some of the cinematography in this thing is just unparalleled, and especially those desert shots where you have, you know, just these incredibly stark blacks up against these beautiful whites of the sand. I think some of the day for night stuff is really gorgeous looking. People like to knock day for night these days.
Yeah, wait, I'm going to pause there because I have in my notes everything in this movie looks great except for day for night.
People like to knock day for night, but it
looks bad.
There are dozens of us. It's the way they shot nighttime, and it looks good. Like, it can look bad. It's not the, you know, authentic looking, quote unquote, but whatever. I know it's daytime. I know they're making a movie. They're also not in World War I, right? For me, it's like one of those things where it's like, I can't remember who, is it a David Lynch quote? Peter Jackson, somebody. It might be Peter Jackson. Where they're like, where does the light come from? It's the same place as the music.
Right.
Like who cares? It's fine. It's a movie.
I think it's Lynch.
Cool. Yeah, I've been in a Lynch whirlpool lately, so you could tell me he said basically anything, and I would believe.
Well, one thing he did say in the movie The Fabelmans was the horizon goes at the top, the bottom. And I was thinking about that the entire time during this rewatch because the horizon is always perfectly placed, especially the scene where Peter O'Toole meets Omar Sharif for the first time, and the horizon is cutting off their heads.
Yeah,
what a cool shot!
Looks great. Looks really, really good. The one thing, Jake, I don't begrudge any of the white savior stuff, honestly, because I think the movie kind of grapples with it. I think the movie
also what happened in real life.
Right. Yeah. But I also think like the way they're telling the story, they want you to think about that. Right. Like there's the Alec Guinness quote. That's where I'm going, by the way. We'll get there in a second, where he says, like, you're one of these Englishmen who love the desert, and sort of like alludes to this idea that like white guys come here and they fall in love with like quote unquote mysticism, and then like that's what we watch happen to this guy, right? And it eventually destroys him. I was really thinking about the Guinness performance a lot on this watch, just because like trying to unpack it, right? The politics of it. It is unfortunate that Hollywood was operating in such a way at this time where the only person that was going to play that role was going to be a British white man who they shoe shined up, basically, right? Like, that is unfortunate. It is upsetting that that is the history of this industry that we love so much. It's unfortunate that it's still kind of what happens in this industry, you know, where you'll just cast like a Jewish guy to play anything from Spanish to Italian, you know, because we just have a general like swarthy barometer that we're happy with.
You're just talking about Eli Wallach doing every role now.
Well, I was goofing about, I was thinking last night about Oscar Isaacs just kind of being generically like, yeah.
So the today version of it is your turkey Turkish, you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I love him in everything. But anyway, my point was I think Guinness does portray this character really well, and like in a nuanced way that is like respectful to the historical character, and like does a good job with it, right? And but I wanted to watch it critically because I did want to be like, is this something that I should like, as a person who thinks of myself as like liberal and socially on the brink of these sorts of things, like, is this something I should look at skeptically? And I think, you know, I don't like that it was a historical thing that happened in movies, but I think that the performance is good. I think Guinness portrays the character well, and I think, you know, there's a lot to like in this story being told, and that was a thing that was gonna, you know, like right. We do a lot of that with movies, but it's one of those. I think
there's I think the modern version of that now too is this great tweet: to be a white guy is a constant struggle, where you think a lot of things about Japan are interesting, but you don't want to be all weird.
I've been reaching that point in my own life lately.
Yeah, it happens. Wait, can we go back to Day for Night for a second? Because let's do it. I'm just curious. So the version I have is, I think the version that is on the Criterion, it's not the Criterion release, but it's, I think, the same version that's on the Criterion channel.
Yeah.
It's the exclusive limited edition double discer, but it doesn't make Day for Night look good. It looks like dim. So I'm just curious, maybe the 4K restoration actually is doing something that I need to go on eBay for.
It might be. It's also just like, for me, right? I think that it can be, I've seen it done so much worse, right? And I think that when I'm looking at, like, you've got so much light out there in the desert, right? That is like pouring into the aperture of the camera, that I think you can slot a blue filter over it in a way. Like, again, I don't think it looks like night, you know. Right. We've been very obsessed on Nerdy Here First lately. I guess not lately. I guess it's been going on for a while now. Ever since Nope came out, and I used to have this guy's name off the top of my head because it's a really fun one to say. But the cinematographer on Nope,
this guy, the guy who talks like this.
No, not in the movie. The actual cinematographer of the picture. But a fair point of confusion. They had to create a piece of camera technology that would actually let them film nighttime. Like, they didn't do day for night. They had like a second camera that was just shooting thermal, and they compressed the thermal footage with the actual nighttime footage and used that to adjust the light digitally in a way that made the nighttime look really cool. That's next level, right? And I find it really, really interesting when people push the envelope like that.
Hoyte van Hoytema is the
name you were looking for. But there are a lot of things in Lawrence of Arabia that I think I'm able to just cinematographically step back at and go, this is like just some of the best looking shit I've ever seen in my life, right? And like Peter O'Toole a little bit just contributes to that, right? Like, introducing Peter O'Toole credit in this movie gets me every time, because I'm just so amped for here we go. It's just lightning in a bottle. He's got it in one. There is no adjusting for this guy. He's slowly going to learn how to be a stage actor. He just rips right into this movie like he's on fire on that motorcycle.
Oh yeah, I mean, cinematography wise, I mean, I think a lot of movies, you know, like the big epic thing, like I'm sure, like, so we'll have seen this in Dune, or even, you know, any of these like big epic like movies, like, you know, you can look at the Peter Jackson, you know, like the Lord of the Rings stuff, just the way these like big epic movies are shot, or the way a lot of Spielberg stuff is shot. You can trace this all back to, you know, to Lawrence of Arabia. Like when people say big sweeping epic movies, this is what they're talking about. You know, it's from this. You know, The English Patient would be another movie that I would, you know, that would remind me of this. Like, you know, these big, you know, desert sequences. I mean, there's a lot of movies that owe a lot of debt to their style, to this movie particularly. Brad, you said that earlier, David Lean is, you know, certainly one of the most imitated directorial styles that we've had, and I think that's just, you know, that's just going to continue. I mean, stylistically, there's nothing that's like dated about it, or, you know, some of the things that we talk about on this podcast, like, oh yeah, this is, you know, a style of the 40s or the 60s or whatever, but, you know, it gets updated into a more modern thing. What they're doing in Lawrence of Arabia doesn't need to be like modified or updated. Like the way they shot the desert and everything, like that's just going to last forever, and it's awesome.
Well, we're regressing, which is the problem, because you have this, which looks incredible. In fact, if you compare this to the Ten Commandments, which came out 6 years earlier, it's incomparable. There's maybe 3 scenes in the Ten Commandments that were shot on location, and they in the movie look so much better than the scenes that aren't, except for that one scene we talked about on the podcast where Moses is talking to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh has the blue screen behind him. It looks very fake. Moses has the real desert behind him. And there's symbolism of Moses is going off to an authentic life while Pharaoh's going back to his manufactured life. That's the only place in that movie where the blue screen looking fake works. Everywhere else, it looks very cheesy. And now we have this, it's all on location. I think most of it was shot in Jordan. It looks incredible. And it was imitated in a very productive way for, I don't know, I'd say 45 years. I watched Jodorowsky's Dune, just going back to Dune. It's awesome. And it made me want to watch El Topo, Jodorowsky's Western, which is so clearly influenced by how Lean filmed the desert. But now, with the exception of Dune, stuff filmed in the desert looks like shit. There's only one movie I can think of. Actually, there's one more exception. It's John Wick 4. And it's because Chad Stahelski is obsessed with David Lean. And he wanted the beginning of John Wick 4 to look like Lawrence of Arabia. It worked. And it looked good. John Carter from Mars, or any number of stuff that has a fake. I guess Mission Impossible also had a good desert scene in their new one. That movie didn't fall apart visually till the end.
Yeah, well, that's one of the problems I think is that anything with a budget is just going to soundstage it, and digital sand and digital dust looks so bad. And half the time the actor doesn't even end up getting dirty for continuity reasons. And then that's just so visually unappealing to the eye and to the spirit. I think, though, kind of backtracking to some of the comparisons you were making, right? One of the reasons this movie is so successful also, maybe one of the things people hesitate with it when they come up to, right? Maybe even one of the reasons why it took me or Jake longer to watch it. I think the title confuses it a lot with those like sword and sandals movies, like Ten Commandments or Ben-Hur, yeah. Right? And I think people hear the name and they see the runtime and they're like, oh, I don't want 4 hours of big sound stagey epic like schlog. And it's not that at all, right? It's a war movie.
Right. I mean, it starts with a guy having a suicide off a motorcycle.
Yeah. It's very, I think it plays against people's expectations in a modern way.
Yeah.
Or for a modern audience, maybe.
I think the worst, sorry, just going back to my last point for 1 second, I just think the worst thing we lose when things are shot on the volume or any other kind of a set when it comes to this is the scope of the desert is flattened. That's one of the great things about having the desert in camera. It's a plain, it's a flat plain. There's nothing else on Earth that looks like this. And there's nothing you can do on the computer. Well, not yet. We'll see. But there's nothing that we can currently do on a computer that makes you feel like you're on the ocean, but it's land. And that's an incredible effect. There are so many scenes in Lawrence of Arabia that make me feel so claustrophobic because there's nothing forever. The scene where he has to go back to save the guy he eventually has to get. This movie rules. Yeah. He goes back to save the guy he eventually has to murder. Wild. It feels like you put yourself in his shoes and think, I'm running at nothing forever. Mm-hmm. It's insane. Or the well scene that I mentioned earlier with the horizon at the neck. Right. Ali is approaching them for a full minute.
Right.
He just lets you sit with that for a long time, just wondering what's going to happen.
After that first shot, and you really just gives you time to think like, all right, well, we have water. Presumably he doesn't. This isn't going to go well.
What's this going to be? Yeah. It's amazing. In fact, I think the pre-intermission stuff is much more, I don't think it's true. It's much more exciting and interesting than the post-intermission stuff, unless you're really into the political fallout of the Arab Revolt from like a really depressing point of view where they sort of let themselves down, which I think is where this movie actually does kind of fall into some white savior problems. When Lawrence decides to become bloodthirsty, that's when the Arab Revolt loses its moral center. And when they stop being able to cooperate and just sort of give up to the British. That's sort of like Last Samurai Avatar stuff for me.
I think that's fair. Mm-hmm. And that like focus on his sort of like myth making, right? Yeah. As sort of directly parallel to the success or failure of the endeavor.
All right. And Jake, you watched Dangerous Man, Lawrence After Arabia. Just give us like a minute on what the hell that is.
Well, it's a sort of sequel. It came out in the early 90s. It came out actually right after they had re-released Lawrence of Arabia to theaters, I think for the first time since the 60s. So I think maybe they were trying to capitalize on that. It's got a really young Ralph Fiennes. This is even like pre-Schindler's List. So I don't think he was known at all. And he's Ralph Fiennes. He's pretty good in it. But the movie is a lot of like the second half of Lawrence of Arabia, where it's a lot of like talking and like political behind the scenes stuff. And there's not, a lot of action or a lot of desert stuff in it. So it's a lot of talking. It's barely okay. It's like a good TV movie. Wouldn't really recommend going out of your way for it.
It's on YouTube if you want to watch it. We thought about watching it and then decided not to over in this household. I will say Spielberg says that he hired Fiennes for Schindler's List because he saw this.
Well, Lawrence of Arabia doing all kinds of things for Spielberg.
I don't know if that's true, but That's what has been said.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, timeline wise, it would fit right in.
Yeah. Well, let's talk Oscars real quick because, well, maybe not real quick. It's going to take
how much time you got? I've got the list here. It didn't actually win all of the Oscars. It just won a bunch of them. It was nominated for 10 and it won 7 of them. The ones it lost actually is kind of a little bit surprising because it lost for adapted screenplay. Omar Sharif was nominated for supporting actor and lost, and Peter O'Toole was nominated for best actor and he lost. However, he lost to Gregory Peck in To Kill a Mockingbird, which is, again, you want to talk about white savior problems, that's a whole nother podcast, but I mean, it's an understandable loss. Like Gregory Peck To Kill a Mockingbird wins best actor. Like that's not a hard pill to swallow, for the time. So yeah, those ones that it lost as far as what it won. Best picture, obviously, as we've mentioned. Best director, David Lean. The original score. That time they had 2 original score awards. One of them was for a score that's substantially original, and then they had another one for score that was like an adapted or like for musicals, because they made a lot more musicals back then.
Sure.
And then also one for best sound direction, best film editing, and then the best art direction and cinematography, but the color versions, because again they had 2 awards back then for color and black and white for some of their awards, so it won the color versions of those. So yeah, 7 for 10 in the 1962/63, because the awards are given out in 63, but for 1962, yeah, it went 7 for 10. So good night for Lawrence of Arabia.
Awesome. I don't know if you guys have a lot of experience with 1962 movies. I've got a quick top 5 I'd like to shout out if we've got.
I've got a top 4, so I can get in on that.
I'm going to run through mine real quick. Number 5 is The Fabulous Baron Munchausen. Have y'all seen this?
No.
Never.
Yeah, this is a weird movie. So it's a rotoscoped animated movie it's a fantasy. It's weird. I'm like deep in the animation history rabbit hole at this point, and it's pretty good. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Some cool designs, and early rotoscoping is neat and weird. If you're into like the Ralph Bakshi, Lord of the Rings, you'd be into this. It's a little less gothic, a little more sci-fi. Then I've got Dr. No, the first Sean Connery James Bond movie. Y'all know what Dr. No is. I don't have to say more about that. Lonely Are the Brave, which is a movie I saw because of Walter Matthau. He plays a sheriff chasing Kirk Douglas's sort of off-the-grid cowboy after Douglas has committed a series of crimes to try to help his friend get out of jail. It's cool. It's like a modern Western. It came out in 62, but it takes place in 1962. You don't see a lot of non-period Westerns coming out then, and this was one. One of the first shots is Douglas like laying on the ground, looking up at the sky, and then an airplane flies by to sort of give you the idea that this is modern. I like that aspect of it. He and Matthau, they're acting opposite each other. They don't share a single scene, which is kind of neat. And then number 2 is Manchurian Candidate, and number 1 is Lawrence of Arabia.
Very similar list. Like I said, I only have 4. Dr. No, actually, for me, is a 1963 because it didn't actually open in the U.S. until 1963. It was, in the UK in 1962. So I'm fine with being, but for me, it's a 63. For 1962, my number 4 is Lolita, the Kubrick film.
Never did it.
In a long time. Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I have it at 3.5 stars. So that's my number 4. Number 3 is the aforementioned To Kill a Mockingbird, which, like I said, problems aside, I still think it's a very good movie, very well made, especially considering the time period. Number 2 then is Manchurian Candidate, and number 1 is Lawrence of Arabia.
I'm gonna try and not copy y'all.
Okay.
So let me take Cleo from 5 to 7 at number 10 or at number 5. I'll take Whatever Happened to Baby Jane just for the drama.
My father-in-law has been trying to get me to watch that forever.
Pretty good. The Betty Davis, Joan Crawford behind the scenes stuff is pretty great.
Yeah.
So watch the movie so you can indulge in how much those two hated each other.
Yeah. I'll watch that. Well, I'd say I'd watch the FX thing afterwards, but I did not like the Truman Capote one.
Listen, whenever you have a free hour, we can talk about my Ryan Murphy feelings.
Okay.
I would actually legitimately put Lawrence of Arabia on there. And then I think I have 2 spots left. I'll say The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Arakari, both solid options.
All right, great. All right, Riley, remind everyone where they can find more from you.
Yeah, you can go to nihf.com. I am the founder and senior entertainment editor of that website where we do all sorts of shows. There is a weekly news show called Nerd It Here Weekly that I host along with our kind of longtime squad. We run through the top news stories of the week. There's also various video game Let's Play stuff. I think we're doing a tabletop game, I've been told. So if you're into any of that stuff, feel free to stop by. And this is actually a great time to pop in because we have a March Madness tournament going where every day on the website, You can vote for your favorite Pop-Tart flavor, and we have them bracketed up, and we're picking the best one. So it's still early days in that. So hop over there and let your voice be heard.
As two Michigan guys, we appreciate your fidelity to the Michigan founder of Pop-Tarts or creator of Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, well, he just passed away, William Post.
Sure.
So we wanted to, we thought we were trying to come up with what our topic would be this year. Last year it was really popular. People were mashing Pokemon together. So we did that last year. We all came up with Pokemon monstrosities. And this year we thought this would be more fun.
That's very nice. Well, rest in peace. He lived a long life.
Yep.
A long, good life, and let a lot of people eat some mediocre pastries. All right. Thanks, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Anytime. I had a blast.
If you want to know what is coming out next week, go to our Letterboxd profile. You can find me at Brad Garoon on Letterboxd. I think Jake, you're Jake Ziegler on Letterboxd.
Yep, it's Jake_Ziegler.
And both of us have pinned to our profiles our Never Did It podcast list. You could also just search for the Never Did It podcast list. And the 2 movies that will be discussed on next week's episode are always at the top of that list.
We have a Facebook page now as well. You can check that out at facebook.com/Never Did It podcast. I'll be posting on that with new episodes and just fun updates from time to time about what we're watching and what's coming up.
So check that out. And thank you for joining us for Never Did It.